Have you ever gone fishing, you're flounder fishing, and you drop your line down, and all of a sudden it's angling away from you, and it's getting really difficult to hold the bottom? That's called line scope by a lot of people, and it can be a big problem when you're flounder fishing. So in this video, I'm going to go into details about why that happens and how you can combat that, and why it's important to combat that. And then we're going to talk briefly about Navionics and what happens when you do your pre-trip planning or you're even out on the water and you're looking at Navionics and it says one thing and you're looking at the depth finder and you're seeing another. So what do you do about that, and where does it happen? So thanks for checking out this video. It is being live streamed right now, and it is going to be up for a regular video right after that. So if you can't make it live Monday night at 10:15, it's here for you to check out later. So wanted to go through an important topic especially for flounder fishermen. And it's one that I hear a lot when I'm on the water. I hear people, especially in heavy current or heavy wind, talking about the difficulties that they're having catching fish. And often they will ascribe the issue to something that they call scoping. And I think most people get that from John Skinner, who's pretty much the godfather of flounder fishing. And he talks about line scope and how it's important that you reduce line scope when you're flounder fishing. And he talks about it in almost every video. So I'm going to go into some details right now about what is line scope, what is the impact on your fishing when you have this scope in your line, and how you can fix that. There are a couple of things that you can do to take care of that. So I'm going to jump right into this right now and get rolling. All right, so first, right here, so let's make sure we define it. So if we take a look at this right here, so line scope is really the angle the line makes from the rod tip to the lure. So if you take a look at the screen and you come way up top, right here at the tip of the rod, all the way down to where the fish is on the bottom, it's really that angle. Now, the way that John Skinner defines it, and most people define it, is it's the angle off of the tip of the rod down to, from perpendicular right here. So this angle right up here would be the scope, or this angle right here. In reality, what it is it's called the angle of elevation. We'll call it scope in this just so that we can remain consistent with Skinner and the way that he talks about it. It's really the angle from the bottom of the water, the bottom of the ocean, in this case, to where the line is. And it's this angle right here, which is the angle of elevation. So if we come over here, John calls this the scope, but the way that you really should look at it is the degrees that it is off of the bottom. So you have a 45-degree angle over here, and you have a 90-degree angle over here. And according to most people, myself included, you want that 90-degree. The 90-degree, this yellow line, let's call this the high vis Power Pro right here, coming straight down. That's what you want. And what often happens when you have a fast current that is pushing you with the current or even against it, you're going to end up with something that's closer to the 45-degree scoping. And that can cause some issues. So I'm going to go through that in some detail here so you can see not only why it happens, but the things that you can do about it. So let's jump over to that next slide right there. All right, so if we take a look at this, let's take a look at that 90-degree, which was, from the previous slide. That was the high vis Power Pro line here, and you can see my wonderful design of a bucktail on the bottom and a teaser on the top here. And let me just kind of lay out exactly what this is showing. So when I tie my rigs, when a lot of people tie their rigs, they have a bucktail or a jig on the bottom. They have about 18 inches of leader material, and then they tie a dropper loop and they put their teaser on here. So that's what this displays right here. So it's 18-inch distance from the bottom, which is where this bucktail is sitting on the bottom of the ocean, up to the teaser, which is right here. This is the 90 degrees, which means it's dropping straight down from the boat. There is no scoping, according to the John Skinner definition. And when you're jigging it, and let's say, for me, for example, I typically jig in about a 6-inch motion. So the teaser will move up and down from the bottom here. When the bucktail is sitting on the bottom, they can move up 6 inches and then back down 6 inches, because I'm just doing a real easy 6-inch bounce or jig on that. So that's your range of motion right there. That's what it looks like when there is no scoping on the lure that you're using when you're fishing. Now, if we move forward, let's get into the real breakdown. And this is why it's important that you have no scope. And you can see right here. So it's the same view that we had before. You still have your 18-inch distance here from the bottom up to the teaser. You have that 6-inch jig, and that's the vertical travel every time you're jigging it. And this over here represents the motion of it, right? So if you're drifting from right to left, you're going to jig up 6 inches. It'll drop straight down 6 inches, up 6 inches, drop straight down. And you're getting that very rapid fire on the top and the bottom jig within this 6-inch range. So this is coming up from the bottom up to about 6 inches off the bottom. And this one's going to be about 18 inches up, and it's going to go to about 24. Sometimes people will drop. I actually bring it up about a foot, and then I jig from there. So I'm actually going to be dropping 6 inches down and then 6 inches back up to the top, because I use a 1 foot jig typically when I'm vertical jigging like this. So you can see some of the benefits right there of that. So here are the real benefits of having that straight up and down 90-degree vertical jig, zero scope. You get more vertical action on the lure, right? So it's going up and down within that range, and it's very tight. You're moving right with the current. It's moving very tight. So you're getting a lot of vertical action on that lure. You're getting a bounce versus a slide presentation on the bottom hook. So think about this bucktail down at the bottom here, right? So here it is down here. It's on the bottom. That's what this brown's supposed to be, this wonderful art here. In a vertical jig like this, it's coming up and it's dropping down, and it's literally bouncing straight back up off the bottom, right? There's very little drag to it because it's just coming straight up, straight down. It's just a bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. And it's not really sliding across the bottom, which is important because the flounder are typically going to bite when it's off the bottom or on the drop on the way to the bottom. They're not typically picking things up directly off the bottom of the ocean. So, you know, it's not necessarily going to be in the strike zone, which is what the fourth one is right here. So maximum time in the strike zone. It's not sitting on the bottom for any length of time. It's staying up in the strike zone, which is where the flounder are typically going to get it, right? So that's the 90-degree. That's what you want typically when you're jigging for flounder. But there are challenges when you're out there, and it's not always easy to get that straight up and down presentation. And that's where people will say, well, I'm scoping, I'm having difficulties. You know, what do I do here? This is unfishable, I've heard from time to time. So what do you do? Well, it's pretty simple. You jump over and you take a look at this 45-degree. And here's the issue, though. Here's the issue with the 45-degree. So here we have that same fish sitting down at the bottom. Over here on the right, we've got the same 18-inch dropper loop at the top here with the bucktail on the bottom, but take a look at this. 18 inches is still up here, but now we're on an angle, so it's not sitting up straight at 18 inches. So you're actually not fishing the bottom 18 inches or 24 inches, including that bounce of the bottom. You're actually going to be fishing maybe about half of that, maybe 9 to 12 inches, because it's now on an angle. So what you see is your 6-inch jigging motion will bring it not up 6 inches, but it'll bring it to the side and up. So it'll go about 3 inches, right? And then back down. And then on the bottom, it'll do the same thing. So you've got this 45-degree scope or angle of elevation. You pull your 6-inch jig, which you would do on a straight drop, or on a 90-degree, which is what you want. But on 45 degrees, you're not getting that vertical action. You're getting a much different action out of the lure, and it's actually going to look more like this, right? So instead of coming straight up, you remember the other one, it was straight up and down like this, straight up and down. This one is going to come off to the left and then drop down, and then could probably represent it a little bit better. If you're drifting right to left, it's probably going to drag a little on the bottom as you scoop it up. So it's more of a down, and then it slides, and then it comes up. They're not going to be biting it on the slide on the bottom. That's why people say don't drag your baits. Don't drag your baits when you're flounder fishing. They're not picking it directly off the bottom. They're going after fish that are off the bottom already. So what you're doing here is you're getting your less action. Let me move into that. You're getting less vertical action. You're getting more horizontal action or half horizontal action. You're getting more slide on the bottom lure, which again, I probably should have put this in a different order. It gives you less time in the strike zone because it's dragging the bottom, but then you have a narrower vertical coverage. You're not covering this 18 to 24 inch bottom section of the water column. You're down at around half that. So you're, 9 to 12 inches, depending on how close you are to actual 45 degrees. So those are some of the really big issues that you have when you have this 45-degree scoping when you're flounder fishing. And it can be a big problem. But what I hear all too often is it was unfishable. My line was scoping too far, and I didn't have any heavier weights. I threw on a 4-ounce bucktail, and I still couldn't get down. And I've asked people, well, how deep were you? You must have been out pretty deep. I'm like, no, it's 25 feet. Okay. Well, 25 feet, I don't even own a 4-ounce bucktail. I fish, inshore mostly. I do go offshore sometimes, but I'm typically fishing in water that is between 8 feet and 30 feet. I'll go down to 60 feet in some areas in the inlets. But I don't own a 4-ounce. I own one 3-ounce bucktail, which I use as a heavy weight on my underwater camera to keep the camera facing down so that it stays in view. Otherwise, I'm using up to 1.5 ounces. And and that's because to fix scoping, it's not just about the weight like everybody thinks. So, what does it do? So scope reduction. Let's take a look at the same thing. You got the 2 lines in there again. So you have the wind and the current, let's say, as an example. I'm just going to do one example. I'm not going to go really into detail on this because you could literally talk for hours about different ways that you can counteract this. But let's say you had the wind direction coming from the right to the left on the screen. The current's going in the same direction, which, by the way, would be an accurate representation for this dude up in the kayak who's fishing, because you should be facing into the current, especially if you have a pedal kayak. It gets you less wind resistance or wind area to catch the winds, which will it'll slow you from the wind pushing you with the current. It also cuts the current better. It also allows you to pedal into the current. So you should be facing that way. But let's say you have those conditions. So it's right to left, you're facing into the current. You're trying to figure out what to do. So the solution is you can add more weight, or you can change the speed at which you're traveling. And the biggest part of that is changing the speed at which you're traveling. Now, I do truly believe that there are unfishable days in certain locations if you're fishing from shore. It is also possible that there are unfishable days if you're fishing from a boat or a kayak. If you're in a ripping 6-knot current in an inlet, you shouldn't be fishing that inlet. It's going to be too complicated. It's going to be too difficult to get down there. Maybe that is where you use a 4, 6, 8-ounce bucktails. And again, remember, I focus more inshore. So I know offshore, you're going to be using, some of these wrecks in the 60 to 100 feet of water, you're going to be using those bigger lures to really get down there. I'm talking more the shallow water stuff. So you can add weight, but the biggest thing is people do forget that you can change your speed. And again, take a look at that kayak sitting at the top. If that water is coming from right to left and the wind is coming from right to left, that guy needs to be pedaling into that current to slow down. I'll give you an example from this past weekend, not this weekend, a couple weekends ago. I had the same thing. It was a wind with the current, which everyone says is great, but it's not great when the wind is ripping at 15 miles an hour, 10 to 15 miles an hour that day. And the current's going in the same direction, and it's mid-tide, so it's moving. Probably the mid-tide to about 2 hours before low tide. So it's really moving out, and the wind's going with it. And that means that it's trying to move me at 2.5 to 3 miles per hour, and I'm not doing anything. It's just the wind. Big guy, I got some surface area on me. I'm catching the wind. The boat's catching the wind, and the current's really ripping. So if you listen, let's go back to John Skinner. If you listen to Skinner, he likes to fish between 1 and 1.4 miles per hour. To me, that's kind of arbitrary. It's not necessarily the speed that you're moving that matters. It's the speed relative to the current that really matters. So if you have and I try to go just below that, a little bit lower. So if I determine that the current on a 1 ounce bucktail on the bottom, I can get it straight up and down. If I'm traveling at if I'm just going with the current. Okay, I'm going to slow it down from that 1 mile an hour current. I'm going to go about 0.8 to 1 mile per hour. So that way I just keep it in the zone just a little bit longer. But I'm going to be pedaling into that current to slow myself down so that I'm not over drifting and I'm not drifting faster than that weight can keep up as I'm bringing it along the bottom of the water column. So there are a lot of things that factor into it. A lot of things that you have to consider when you're out there. You can't just go out and just start adding weight. You're going to end up with a bucktail that's too big. It's going to be way too big for the conditions that you're in, the depth of the water that you're in, or maybe even the fish that you're targeting. You're going to have, the 6-inch baits on there that you don't necessarily need in certain situations. So you want to make sure that you change the speed that you're traveling and you change the weights. I would always try to go with the lightest weight that you can possibly get away with. And it helps you with a better presentation, a more natural presentation, in my opinion, and then adjust the speed of the boat. So if you have a trolling motor, you can do that. The easiest thing for me, I had a boat, and I did not like trying to do this with the boat, kicking it in and out of gear. It didn't have a trolling motor, but the pedal kayak is the easiest. You just nose it into the wind, and it's just a slow pedal. If you look at some of my videos, when there's wind kicking up, I rarely stop pedaling all day. And when I'm flounder fishing, because I'm trying to match that current. I want to naturally just drop the line and have it just coast with me along with the current so that it looks natural. It's going around the same speed as the bait fish that are down there that are going to try to trick the flounder, away from them and to my lure. So I want it to look natural. I want it to be at that speed or just a little bit slower, so I stay in that strike zone just a little bit longer. So I'm changing the speed. I'm going into the wind, and I'm working it that way. This also becomes important, wind against tide. That is probably the worst situation that anyone can run into, because flounder are going to face up current. They're going to look for the bait that's coming towards them. And then all of a sudden the wind is blowing you in the opposite direction of the current. I hear that being called unfishable all the time, and that truly can be really difficult. I mean, it's really difficult to get the attention of a flounder to get up, turn around, and chase. The fish, they're like, in this sense, they're like humans. If you don't want to get up and chase somebody that's running full speed, I don't know if you've ever seen somebody speeding so fast on the highway, they go past the cop and the cop doesn't even go after them. They're like, no, gone, not going after him. If that's your bait flying by, the flounder's not going after it. And if they're going the other direction, they're definitely not going after it. They're going to wait for something that's a little bit lazier coming by and get the easy meal. So wind against tide is an issue. And that's where you need to start looking into things like a drift sock. You throw that overboard, you let that pull you into the, with the current against the wind. And it's important that you take a look at the correct size drift sock. For a kayak, there are things that are like 14 inches up to 24 inches, and they're called kayak or small boat. I have a 24-inch, and it's not big enough. It's good, but it's not quite big enough to overcome, the winds that we get in South Jersey. Even this past week, 10-mile-an-hour wind against a ripping tide within a mile of the inlet, and it's going to move me in the right direction. But whereas, if what I want to do is move 1 mile an hour, or let's say it's 1 mile an hour that I really want to move, it's going to move me in about half that. That's a little too slow for me. Now I'm staying in the range a lot. I'm going in the right direction. At least it's fishable. But if I had a 36-inch, or even I've seen people with 54s on a kayak, that's a little big for me. They're tough to get in. They get really heavy, even though the water does come, straight through the funnel at the bottom. They're really heavy, but you want to look at a drift sock. If you throw that out in a wind versus tide, and it's big enough for the vessel that you're in, it will pull you with the current, and it will fight that wind. It'll cut through that wind, and it'll get you going in the right direction. The other option is, if you have a trolling motor, just kick that in, put it right into the current, so that you're going with the current. And just cut through the wind that way. You're just going to have to continually work that all the way up, whatever channel or whatever structure you're fishing at that time. So that's really what it comes down to. And again, I could go into a ton of detail about it. but I don't think it's really necessary to go into it right now. Maybe I can do another video on it if there are any other questions, that arise from it. If you do have any questions, make sure you do put it in the comments, put it in the chat if you're viewing this in the live chat about that, and I'll see if I can answer it right now, or we can put it into a topic for another video coming up in the future. So that's the first topic, scoping. So again, it's, a lot of people talk about it. I don't think a lot of people truly understand what it is. It's the angle that you're pulling it across the bottom of the channel or the structure that you're on. And vertical is typically going to be better. There may be times where you want to drag a bait. There might be. And if so, then you need to position yourself and get the weights that you need and the speed that you need to get that 45-degree or better angle so that you're dragging that bait. I don't drag baits. I find it gets too many snags and not enough fish. But hey, it may work for you. If that's the case, go for that 45-degree angle and work it from that perspective. All right, so let's jump over to the next topic. And this is something I just wanted to bring up. A lot of what I do on this channel is go through how I find the spots that I fish, or why I fished a particular spot and how I did. And I use Navionics. I've been using Smart Fishing Tides, which is a Salt Strong page, but within there, what I'm looking at a lot of times is the Navionics maps of the areas that I'm looking to fish. So I want to make sure that I hit this topic because it's important, right? This entire channel is so that we maximize our time when we're out on the water and we can catch more fish, so on and so forth. However, there can be problems with Navionics. And I want to go through and show you some problems that I ran into. So this right here is an example. And I did mention this in the last video that I did, or the last live stream. So this is the Navionics map. So if you're not familiar with them, let me just show you a little bit about it. So this green area is water, but it can be exposed at low tide. You can see the land structures here. If you really look, this is actually Google Earth view. So you can see the little creeks back in here. This one's marked as a blue area of water, which means it's shallow. There are technical things. I think it's under a foot. It's shallow, but it's a channel that's marked on Navionics. You can see this one is going to be dry sometimes. Anything in this green is going to be dry sometimes, depending on the tide. And then you have these contours, these circles, these lines. Those show the contours. If you just think of a topographical map from back in high school when we were doing geography and everything, that's what this is. It just shows the contours of the bottom of these channels, these creeks, of these inlets, everywhere. And right here, you can see it says 1 foot. So then it probably goes 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot. So maybe we have a 5-foot hole right here. All right, well, it doesn't look that interesting because the rest of this is blue, which means it's really shallow. According to Navionics, it's really shallow. And you probably can't even get into these green areas at various times during the day. So this looks like an area that I really don't want to look at. However, I did want to look at it in person because I didn't quite believe this was true. It didn't look that shallow. I could see it when I had passed by a few times. And there was an area all the way at the top that I really wanted to check out. So I went back there and I checked it out. And I have a fish finder on my kayak, and I had that on. And this is what it kind of looked like. Now, I'm not an artist, so this is the best I'm going to do. I'm going to show you right here. Generally speaking, these red areas right here, this is 20 feet of water. It's between 15 and 20 feet of water. Remember, this is blue. That's like barely any water. This is a hole that goes all the way down to 5. This orange was about 10 to 15 feet of water. And then, this blue, I will say this blue was not under 2 feet in any place. But was probably around 3 to, generally 3 to 8 feet. So you would think from the previous view right here, I don't want to fish that. There's nothing to look at. But when you look at this, you've got a long trough at about 15 to 20 feet down this side. It gets a little shallow over here. But then you have this another one over here on this side. It gets down to around 20 feet. You got this shallow area around this creek, but then it got deep again. This went on for well over a mile. So perfect example of when Navionics is wrong. And in this case, what a great example. You would never complain when you're out there if you just happen upon this spot. You're like, wow, I found something with some potential. Now, it doesn't really tell you what the structure looks like on the bottom. If that's just a flat wasteland at 20 feet, it's not great, but at least it's 20 feet. It's 20 feet off of this 10 feet. It's something. It's something that's at least fishable if you can't get into other areas and other areas taken by other people. It gives you some potential. So you want to keep your eye out, and sometimes you get a good surprise like this. Sometimes you don't. And this is a spot that I was at last week. Now you can see why I went. Now this was a long pedal. It was over 2 miles to get there against the current and against the wind. So it took me about an hour to get there. And by the time I got there, I was like, this is great. Look at this hole right here. 4 feet, 2 feet, but man, 5, 6, 7, 9 down to 22 feet. This looked like something I wanted to check out. And then there was another one up to the right up here that I wanted to check out as well. And there's an inlet right up here around the corner, about a half a mile. So it looked like it had a lot of potential, some nice creeks, which we had some water coming through. It just looked like something that was worth it. So I took the long pedal to get up there, and it was a little bit of a risk because according to these Navionics maps, there weren't a lot of good spots to go up there. So I was essentially committing my day to this. And I got up there, and let me show you what it looked like. Again, the great graphic artist I am. The hole wasn't there. This other hole wasn't there. None of it was the way it was supposed to be. This right here in the blue, in all these blue areas, was between 20 and 30 feet deep, and a very long trough that went a very long way. And the only reason it's stopping here is because I didn't go any further up. This orange, you would think, because this is showing, look, the 2 feet here, 3 feet, 2 feet, 1 foot, almost dry right here. 2 feet, 4 feet. This hole is only down to 7. I mean, this was in the 15-foot range here, 10 to 15, with probably averaging around 12 to 13. And then we had another trough down here. And then I didn't even explore up here because there was so much structure in here that so much structure in there that I could work, that I just had to keep going back over it, looking to see if I could get some results out of it. So that's what I was doing. That's what I was hoping would happen. But after I started looking around, but what I originally went up for was not there. It was not a good situation to go up there and realize the only spots that I had picked out weren't there. And when I initially went out, I actually came out in this area, and this is very flat, this orange area. So it didn't look good at all. And I actually missed all of this deep stuff on the way up because I was trying to get through the middle of the hole. And then it came straight up here, and this is flat. This orange probably extends down here and over this hole. And again, this hole wasn't there. So it's a little disappointed after that long pedal. I was a little tired. So what I did is I decided, well, I'm going to go to this far bank, and I'm going to kind of drift it back on the incoming. Again, I was going against the tide coming out. I actually came out this channel right here. I decided I'm just going to drift back. So I started drifting back, and I'm looking on my phone at Navionics for any other area to look. And I look down, and all of a sudden it drops off, and it drops down to 20 feet. So I grabbed some gulp, I baited up, and I started fishing there. And it was an okay day. I caught fish all day. Actually, I'll have a video about that in more detail, I think, coming out this week. But it just shows this is when it kind of goes bad when you come up here and it's not what you wanted. This down here, by the way, 4 feet and 3 feet, 1 foot. This was still very deep down here, and there was actually a channel, which I can't scroll. This is just a capture of the page. I wanted to kind of protect the location because it's a very accessible area, but there are some people that work really hard and did all this scouting, and I don't want to kind of burn all the scouting that they're also doing. I did talk to a guy out there who was a little disappointed that it wasn't his own spot anymore because I found this trough up top. But anyway, around the corner, it was saying 1 foot, and there were boats back there, and I mean big boats. There were 25, 30-foot boats fishing back there. So I could have gone around the corner and fished there as well. It looked unfishable on Navionics, but the point is Navionics isn't always right. In this case, it turned out looking bad. And then there was some opportunity up in this area that was good. And in the other one, it turned out to be much better than it looked like. Looked like there was no water at all. So it can be one of the two. So my recommendation is, first of all, continue to use Navionics. Continue to do your pre-trip planning, but make sure when you do it that you're planning out multiple spots and multiple options. I unfortunately didn't do that. I kind of rolled the dice and figured, all right, well, I hit these 2 holes, which didn't exist. And if it didn't work out, my initial plan was, well, then I'll head offshore. I'll head out another half mile up, make it a 2.5 to 3 mile pedal. I'll go offshore out the inlet, and I'll just come down on the outgoing tide, which was going to start in a few hours, down to the bottom of the island, back in the other inlet, and then back up to the launch. And the wind kicked up, and that would have been pretty dangerous on a solo trip heading out that inlet. So I had to bail on that, and I really was pretty much stuck in there unless I wanted to waste a few hours. So my fault. I shouldn't have done it. I was fortunate that I found these spots. I did find a few others that I also fished, but this is just one example of where I went. But I had to go exploring. Once that turned out that those holes weren't there and that Navionics was wrong, it was either the day is done and I just kind of pack it in, or it was time to go exploring, and that's where I went exploring. As soon as I found that trough, I didn't pick up my phone again, didn't look at Navionics again. It was just looking at the Lowrance, and just kind of marking and mapping as much of this area as I could, going up into creek mouths, going around corners, into little bays, around points, and I found a lot of really decent spots. So it's all about exploring sometimes, and that's what I ended up doing, and it worked out pretty well. So with that said, those are the 2 topics I really wanted to hit: the scoping and the Navionics, and encourage you. Make sure you have multiple plans when you get out there, whether or not you're using Navionics. It's not always accurate. In this case, man, everything shifted, and if those holes weren't there, I knew the sand couldn't, and it was supposed to be 1 foot. The sand had to go somewhere, and holes had to form somewhere else. And I was fortunate to find them. I was fortunate to catch some fish. I don't believe I caught any keepers that day though, but there was a decent quantity of fish, but even more importantly, a lesson learned. Got the tight lines, but also got the reminder that you got to go out prepared for more than just, it's okay to be confident, but sometimes you get caught when you're a little overconfident in your planning. So if there are any questions, be happy to hit them right now. If not, I would appreciate it. It really helps me and the channel if you're not subscribed, if you find some value, if you do subscribe. But the likes and the shares are the big things, in the comments. YouTube does look to see that there's some interaction going on. So if you could do that, only if you think that the stream deserves it or the videos deserve it, but I would appreciate that. It really helps me out. So with that, I'm going to jump off, make it a quick night tonight, just about a half an hour. Thanks for checking this out. This will be up for you to see again. If you've missed the beginning, it will be up and available as an uploaded video as soon as YouTube processes it. It takes about 12 to 18 hours for them to do it for some reason, but it will be there. And of course, check out any of the other videos on this channel if you want to see specific spot breakdowns, if you want to see any catches that I've had so far this year. And with that, I'll see you in the next video, and thanks for checking it out. Have a good one.